of Arabia, in fact said, not only out of Arabia, out of the world. To show Subhanalladhi asra bi abdihi. Whenever Allah says Subhanallah in the verses of the Quran, it's because what's mentioned after that is so amazing, it's a miracle. It's a huge thing. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to say, don't think that because of the difficulties that my servant has gone through, that we don't love him. Don't think because you think you're humiliating or diminishing, you're not diminishing him. And Allah shows that look, I can elevate my servant. And he is elevated internally already. All the things that we're going to talk about today, do you think they raised the rank of the Prophet ﷺ? Do you think the Prophet ﷺ increased in his perfection, increased in his honor and his nobility? No. That was just a reflection of how honorable he was. When we learn about how he walked into Masjid al-Aqsa and the place was open to him. So the Prophet ﷺ, we know, was sleeping. Where was he sleeping that night? Okay. Over the house of Hani. So there's difference of opinion. Some say he was sleeping in his house. Some say under a roof. And some say he was sleeping in the semicircular wall of the Kaaba, the Hijr. Okay? Some say he was sleeping at the Kaaba. There's different opinions. And according to one narration, the Prophet ﷺ is not expecting this. And all of a sudden, Jibreel alayhi salam, he's sleeping and the roof of the house comes off. Like literally blew the roof off. Not necessarily a violent way. And angel comes down. Now the Prophet ﷺ, he's a prophet, so he knows Jibreel alayhi salam by this time. But at this time of night, what is it? What could it be? And Jibreel alayhi salam, he tells him to get up. And he tells him to get up. And in some narrations, the Prophet ﷺ, he prepares for worship. And Jibreel alayhi salam, now there's different narrations as to what happens. Some say that the Prophet ﷺ's heart is open, his chest is open, and his heart is washed with Zamzam and filled with Iman and wisdom. When was the first time this happened? When he was a child. When was the second time this happened? According to some narrations, some opinions. When revelation first came. And some narrations say that that night also, the heart was cleansed. And some narrations say that it happened on this night as well. Now what would be the significance of that? They say that the first washing of the heart was to prepare the Prophet ﷺ for a righteous life, to live as a youth who would not be misguided and get into wrong things. And the second washing, right before revelation, was to prepare his heart for the weight of the Quran. Because we also know the Quran is so heavy that if it came down on a mountain, it would crush it. Imagine what it would do to the human heart. And yet the Prophet's heart was strong. Now what was this washing for? If the first one was to prepare him for a righteous life, if the second one was to prepare him for the Quran coming down, what does this washing prepare him for? I'll give you a clue, it's bigger than all the two that went previously. Meeting Allah. Meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In a place beyond time and space. Not in a place, they call it la makan. They call it a place that's not a place. In a way that's not describable. In a modality that's not physical. What does that mean? To meet your Lord. And so the Prophet ﷺ, they say that his heart was cleansed, not that he needed to be purified, it was filled with Iman and wisdom as a spiritual and physical preparation. Now, this itself is a lesson. Right from the beginning. First of all, that sometimes the greatest gifts and the greatest triumph comes after a lot of hardship. When you look at anyone who has triumphed and done great things in this world, they usually came through a lot of hardship. Take any example, worldly examples. Nelson Mandela. You know, he was in jail for what, like 20-something years? I mean, can you imagine spending that long in jail? You would think that that would break a human being. But no, he came out and they tore down the system of apartheid and he became the ruler of his country, the president of South Africa. Gandhi, for example. Again, jailed by the British. I think he spent many, many years in their prisons, hunger strikes, beatings, and he stayed persistent in his goal. And, you know, for whatever reason, he was able to achieve some type of success in his movement. And there were others who contributed, of course, to that. Jinnah and Nehru and many other people. But the point is that sometimes the greatest and sweetest successes and the ones that have the greatest impact can only come after you experience that much hardship. Because that is what really tests the mettle of a person. Sometimes it's if you don't go through certain things, then you're not strong enough. Not only are you not strong enough, but you have not pushed boundaries enough. And so, subhanAllah, that's the first lesson. The second lesson is that you cannot time when your successes come. The Prophet didn't say, all right, well, this year was Ta'if, then later on was, the passing of the two beloveds to him, the year of sorrow. And so, by this time, 6 months, I should be somewhere in the seventh heaven. This wasn't the case. In fact, the way that Allah works is it's on His time, not your time. And yet, what did He do? Do you think in between those times? People call it the year of sorrow. But people misinterpret it in our time now because of the pop psychology culture that we have. It wasn't the year of depression. Our Prophet ﷺ didn't stop working for the sake of Allah. Not that there's any stigma, of course, against depression. There's none. But we shouldn't try to impute something to the Prophet ﷺ. It was the year of sorrow. But he kept on calling to Allah. And so we have to keep our heads down and keep going. Now what's another lesson? Go ahead, what's another lesson in the washing of the heart? And the reason I'm asking you is because I can prepare all this. But what I would rather do is I would rather get you guys to start getting those juices flowing, that exercise that. So that when you read something in Quran Hadith, the meanings start to jump out at you. You have to get rid of the fear of being able to look at scripture or hadith and be able to draw meaning from it. You have to trust yourself. And this is a safe space. There's no right or wrong answer, okay? But if there's something that's off, then we can talk about it. But what does that mean? What's the significance? What's the lesson for us? Are we going to go through, are the angels going to come down and do this for us before the MCAT or something? No. Right? But it shows you that sometimes before significant events, before significant success, you should purify your heart. You see, people who try to get involved, for example, Islamic work, how many times do people get involved in Islamic work and they have not taken a hard look at themselves? What was the Prophet's heart filled with? The two things I mentioned? First one was? The Prophet's heart was filled with two vessels. With what? Hikmah and wisdom. Iman. Faith, hikmah and iman. Those, for anybody working in the Islamic field or anybody doing anything for the sake of Allah, you have to try yourself to fill your heart with iman. Okay? And fill your heart with wisdom. Of course, we're all going to be imperfect. I'm not saying I've done this or anything, but you try to spend, and how do you do that? It's not going to be a miraculous way. It's going to be through studying. It's going to be through keeping the company of righteous people. It's going to come through volunteering. It's going to come through coming to the gatherings of dhikr and knowledge. It's going to come through devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why they say that you should not speak before you're half-baked. You should not try to undertake. If you have a big project that you want to do, I mean, anytime you do anything, you want to become a profession, a certain profession, you have to go through school for it. But in Islam, the greatest thing is not the skills that you're going to use in your da'wah. or your personal piety projects, but it's the cleanliness of your heart, the purity of your heart. Because if you try to enter a situation of high spirituality with diseases in your heart, then those will trip you up. You will not achieve what you want to achieve. And so our beloved Prophet ﷺ, he was brought the buraq. As we know, this is it's a beast. We can't say animal because it's a celestial creature. The Prophet ﷺ describes it as being between the size of a mule and a horse. So meaning it's slightly smaller than a horse. And buraq, we don't, again, people try to say, oh, is it true that Muhammad flew to heaven on a winged horse? And they try to catch Muslims with this. Do you believe that Prophet Muhammad flew to heaven on a winged horse? And they try to ridicule. Why does it sound to them like it's ridiculous? Because they have made so many stories, fiction, fantasy, using those motifs. So it's become fake to them to hear that. Not realizing that it started with our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Do you see the difference? This is part of the thing about fantasy that you have to be warned about. When your kids as well, when they learn about a lot of make-believe, fantasy, witchcraft, all of a sudden they begin to look at all supernatural things as though they are myth and stories. And don't let yourself be browbeaten by secular people or doubters. This is real and true. So yes, the Prophet can fly to heaven on a winged horse. There's nothing wrong with that. I think I mentioned this once before. You can look up right now on YouTube. It's a clip, not right now, but when you go home. The most impressive, one of the greatest acts of faith that I saw was about this issue. When Richard Dawkins, the chief atheist of the world, the biggest proponent of atheism, he was being interviewed by Mehdi Hassan. Anybody know this clip? And you guys know Richard Dawkins? Richard Dawkins is this really arch atheist. He's written books and books and books against God. He hates religion. He doesn't believe it's good. And he was being interviewed by Mehdi Hassan, and who's a journalist. He was based in the Middle East. Now he's here. So Richard Dawkins said to him, talking about religion, he said, people believe that Muhammad ﷺ flew to heaven on a winged horse. And then he told Mehdi Hassan, the interviewer, I will pay you the compliment of assuming that you don't believe that. And Mehdi Hassan immediately said, no, I do. And he said, what? He's like, no, I do believe that he did that. I believe in miracles. I believe in this. I believe in this. I believe in this. And I just, Richard Dawkins was so taken aback because usually he's the one being interviewed, and the whole show, it's a TV show about him. How did this? He just lobbed something out at a journalist. He thought, this is a secular Muslim, and if I just pick on the Muslims, he'll say, oh, okay, yeah, well, He didn't back down. And it was so impressive that to me was an act of iman. When the whole world is watching, your bosses are watching, you're on live television, you're not supposed to bring your beliefs into TV, and yet he was able to say, I believe this. And so we as well, don't allow the missionaries and the Islamophobes, the haters, to start to trivialize these things. The Prophet ﷺ, he got on the buraq, and the buraq started to get skittish. Like, how a horse, when it's on it, when the rider comes on it that it's not familiar with, starts to kind of move around. And Jibreel said, be still, because you have never been ridden by a better rider than the one who is riding you. And subhanAllah, buraq realized, because buraq had been ridden by the previous prophets. In fact, this was the mode of transportation that the prophets were given before. You know how like prominent people, they've got like a certain plane, a private jet, or they've got like a certain car. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends the buraq for his prophets. And he knew about the coming of the last prophet, but Buraq wasn't told who is sitting on him. When he realized who was sitting on him, it is said that he froze and broke out into a cold sweat. Because finally the best of creation, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he's been hearing about in the heavens for all these thousands of years, is finally here. And he has the honor of carrying him on his back. He has the honor of being the means through which this journey will be completed. And so the lesson there is, don't trivialize. If your role is to be of service in the path of Allah, even if it's just transporting someone from one place to another. People often think that, oh, I'm not doing much. Sheikh so-and-so comes to lands in LAX, I picked the Sheikh up and I brought him. Because of that person who volunteered their time, they get the rewards of their intention, but they've also enabled this great journey. So Buraq is told to fly, and the Prophet flies up in the air. And as they're flying, they are going towards Jerusalem. The Prophet is not told where he's going. And this is the beautiful thing about a journey. The journey with Allah is like this, that you don't know where it's going to take you. In the beginning of the night, the Prophet had no idea. But what did he say? He was told, get up. He got up. He was told, embark. He embarked. Disembark. He got off. Alight. And so our Prophet ﷺ flew. And it was said that they made a number of stops on their way to Jerusalem. Anybody know of any of these stops? Yeah, they flew over Musa alayhi salam's grave. It was described as a red sand hill. And it is a place that is now not known to mankind. We do not know. And yet he could see, the Prophet could see from the sky all the way into the ground, and he could see that Musa alayhi salam was praying inside his grave. Now we wonder today, how is that possible? But subhanAllah, we have X-ray technology, we have technology, thermal technology. From space they can read the headline of your newspaper if you're reading it on a bench. And our Prophet ﷺ, obviously Allah can give him much more. And so he looks inside and he sees, subhanAllah, what does a prophet want to do in his grave except worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That's what they were made to do. And the Prophet ﷺ is shown now, and the wisdom, they say. Why wasn't the grave of Musa alayhi salam revealed? Why do you think? He could have revealed the location. Even the followers of Musa alayhi salam, those who claim to, they don't know. Nobody knows. Why? Because they were worried that people would start taking that as a place of worship as well. So Allah hid it from them. Allah hid it, or maybe perhaps something else would be done to it, right? In fact, the only grave that we know for sure of the Prophet is the Prophet's grave. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani said this. Khalil, which is Hebron in Palestine, is the grave of who? Ibrahim alayhi salam, right? And his wife, and some say his son and his immediate family. Even that is like, we know it through the Ahl Kitab. But independently verifiable through unbroken chain of narration, the Prophet's grave is the one that we know. And the Prophet ﷺ, he also stopped in Bethlehem, Bethlehem, because that's the birthplace of whom? Isa alayhi salam. So he stopped in that place. He stopped in Midian, where Musa alayhi salam was given revelation. There was a couple of stops along the way, and he was told to pray 2 units, 2 rakahs. Pray 2 units here. And what it shows as well is, first of all, that you can pray nafil prayers in a holy place. People think it's a bid'ah. It's not a bid'ah. Otherwise the Prophet would not be, and some people think that, why should you visit places of historical significance? This is an innovation. This completely says the opposite. Places that are of historical significance to the Muslims, we can visit them. Now, do you think he's just stopping there for tourist purposes? No. There's something mubarak about that place. It's showing that, yes, so this is why, even if it's not of religious significance, but it's of Islamic significance. You go to Spain. Has anybody been to Muslim Spain? Nobody? Inshallah one day we can. You've been? Okay, you're the only one. MashaAllah. MashaAllah. Inshallah, maybe one day ISOC can take a trip to those places. You know, you go there, you see the effects of Muslim civilization. Pray 2 rakats over there. You go to the cave of the 7 sleepers in Jordan. Has anyone been to the cave in Jordan? Yeah, when I used to live in Jordan, I used to go there, alhamdulillah. You know, not in the actual grave area, but there's a masjid on top of it. Pray 2 rakats. SubhanAllah, it's an abandoned masjid. It's just ruins. And nobody prays there. You pray there for barakah, to remember what the people before you went through, what they sacrificed, right? As long as you don't make it a regular practice that you have to do, it's fine. Now the Prophet ﷺ, he finally comes to Jerusalem, but it's night. And when he comes to Jerusalem, I want you to imagine what the Masjid al-Aqsa is. First of all, let me ask you, Masjid al-Aqsa, which building is Masjid al-Aqsa? Which building in Jerusalem is Masjid al-Aqsa? Which building is it? Trick question. You know it's a trick question. What's the answer? Masjid al-Aqsa is not a building. Masjid al-Aqsa is a compound. Just like the Haram is not a building. The Kaaba alone never used to have, they didn't have a structure around it. That was all the Haram. So people get this wrong. They think that the Masjid al-Qibli, the one that's facing the Qibla, is called Masjid al-Aqsa, and the one with the dome behind is the Dome of the Rock. So there used to be this kind of like myth. Oh, don't get it mixed up. This is not Masjid al-Aqsa. That's Masjid al-Aqsa. This is Dome of the Rock. They're trying to confuse you so they can swap it and then get rid of this. No. That seems like another conspiracy, which is what? To get Muslims to feel like we only actually have a small part of that compound. The entire compound, has anyone been there? Has anyone had the blessing of going there? You have? Anyone else? Anyone? Inshallah one day. SubhanAllah. I haven't been there. I lived for 12 years, I lived an hour away. I couldn't go, I never went. Inshallah one day we'll all go. But it's a compound where it's the way that it was built. This is the Temple of Solomon, okay? It's on a raised platform. It's like it's above the ground. And there was walls all around it of thick rock, huge rock. And these walls were all around it, propping it up, and it's elevated and it's flattened on the top, and then there was buildings built on it. But by the time the Prophet ﷺ reached there, the Temple of Solomon, or the Bayt al-Maqdis, the structure was demolished. The Romans had destroyed it, and the ruins were there, and they were using it as a garbage heap. It was just refuse, because nothing prominent stood there anymore. And subhanAllah, the Prophet ﷺ, when he came, and they destroyed the walls too. Only one wall remains, it's called the Western Wall. That's what's called the Wailing Wall. And that's what the Jewish people still revere from their history, right? Now the Prophet ﷺ came, and he tied Buraq to a ring. It was the same ring that all the prophets used to use before. And the Prophet ﷺ enters the compound, and he finds there are people there. And these are there are many different souls, and he is told that these are the souls of the prophets that came before. Now we don't know exactly how many there are. There's one estimate, there's one narration that talks about an estimate. Anybody know the number of prophets? By one narration, but we don't know if it's exactly authentic. They say 124,000. And in Quran, how many are mentioned? 25. So we know 25, and thousands we don't know. And messengers, there were about 300 and something. So we don't know if all of them were there, but we know that as soon as they come there, the Prophet arrives, he sees them in different, the mic change? He sees them in different forms of prayer, different postures of prayer. And as soon as he comes, they all welcome him. They recognize him. And they all ask him to come to the front. When a call for prayer is made, which we don't know exactly the form, the Prophet ﷺ is asked to lead them in prayer. What type of prayer? We don't know. We just know that he leads them in prayer. And when he's finished leading them in prayer, first of all, what are the lessons of that? The Prophet comes to Masjid al-Aqsa and then he leads them in prayer. What does that show? Why didn't all the prophets come to Mecca? That would have been interesting too, right? He wakes up and he finds all the prophets in Mecca. No, he had to go out. Why? Well, what does it show? What does having everybody behind you show? Come on, guys, you can't get this wrong. Just think with me. Just feel it out. What does it tell you? How does it speak to you? Leadership. Good. What else? The finality, the last messenger. Yes? Last messenger, the finality. So what it shows is that, among many things, is that this is everyone concurs on the prophethood of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And nobody can say, well, Moses wasn't there, so, how do you know he would have accepted the Prophet Muhammad? How do you know Jesus handed over the messengership to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? No, they all saw and they all recognized him as their successor. And the fact that he walked forward and he led them shows that he is equipped to lead them. And when you have a gathering of equals or a gathering of highly, highly trained experts, the one that they ask to lead is the one that they also trust. So you cannot say, well, they're all this. Yes, they are all equal in their respect, but there is leadership even among them. And so nobody can dispute or argue who is the prophet that you should follow. Nobody can say, well, we are from this group, so we follow this prophet, right? Then our beloved Prophet ﷺ, he was offered a choice. And Jibreel ﷺ offers him a tray with one glass of milk or one vessel, and one vessel of what? Wine. Yes, and he just said, here, what would you like to drink? Shub tashrab, Like, it's just a common question. It wasn't like put forward like a test. It was just like, would you like something to drink? Would you like Coke or Sprite? Would you like juice or would you like water? Like that. Because back then, drinking wine was not haram. So the Prophet ﷺ, he could have drank the wine. He chose the milk. And he drank from it, and Jibreel ﷺ said to him, he said, Asabt al-fitra. You have chosen correctly the natural way. And then Jibreel ﷺ says, had you chosen the wine, your ummah would have gone astray. How is that significant? What does that tell you? First of all, what does that tell you? The Prophet took one sip and guaranteed that we are on the right path. And had he taken the wrong sip, we would have all been misguided. What does that really tell you? What do you feel? Go ahead, what do you feel? Don't drink alcohol? Yeah, of course. He's giving us the example that even without knowing halal and haram, right, his heart inclined to natural things. And his heart stayed away from things that are associated with sin or something like that. And, anything that was possibly causing a problem. And also showed us that the Prophet ﷺ, his preference for simple things, wine is something you have to make it. You have to ferment it. And milk is something that comes out pure. You don't have to do anything with it. Well, we do things with it now. We boil it, we pasteurize it, we do this, we take but the Prophet ﷺ preferred something natural. Okay? And the Prophet ﷺ, another thing is, as the ulama say, is that what he does affects the ummah. Like, our fate is tied to his actions. Had he done, can you imagine one sip and we would have gone astray? We are so spiritually tied in our life and our next life to the Prophet ﷺ that you can't separate us from his actions. But even in the most minute actions, he was caring for us. Even in the most smallest trivial things, he was always doing things in our favor and in our interest. The one who really loves you, like your parents, for example, they make sacrifices for you, they make choices for you. For example, usually that's how it goes, you know. But here, the Prophet ﷺ is thinking, and he's not even meaning to do it necessarily. I don't know, maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But our guidance, me and you, was already, the trajectory was determined on that day. So anybody who says that the Prophet ﷺ is just he's a normal human being, just given revelation, he doesn't have any say in what happens, there's nothing like that, they don't understand the connection. Our connection is a very deep one. Every time he said a word, it became the Sharia. If he said no, it became haram. If he said go ahead, it became halal. Every time if he just drank a certain way, if he got up or sat down a certain way, it became sunnah. When he frowned, it became makruh. When he gave a curse or a warning, that became a major sin. So our Prophet ﷺ, this is why we look so closely at his sunnah and his actions. Now the Prophet ﷺ, he chose the right one, and then Jibreel ﷺ took him up. And when he took him up, they went through the 7 heavens. We know that he went through the first heaven. I always like to get the order of this right. He went to the first heaven, and they knocked on the door. And a voice came from within, "Who is it?" And he said, "Jibreel." He said, "Have you been sent for?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Who's with you?" He said, "Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam." So the door opened. And when the door to the first heaven opens, the Prophet ﷺ comes in and he sees Adam alayhi salam. When he meets Adam alayhi salam, I want you to imagine, he says, he's introduced to Adam alayhi salam for the first time. Okay, can you imagine meeting your ancestor, your earliest ancestor, Adam? You're curious. Maybe you're curious. How does he look? What's he like? You're thinking, I owe you so much. You started this whole thing of humanity. It was started with you. The Prophet ﷺ goes in. And there's there's obviously must have been a dialogue as well that took place between them. There must have been, what would two people who go back or have the same mission, how would they speak? But, the details of it are left to Allah's knowledge. We don't know. And then the Prophet ﷺ, he went in the second, but it is interesting that he met the very first human being in the first heaven. And the second heaven, he met who? Same thing happens, knock on the door, it's Jibreel, he opens and he meets Isa alayhi salam, and Yahya, Jesus, and John the Baptist, as they call him in English. And the Prophet ﷺ pointed out, he says they are 2 sons of 2 sisters. So they were cousins, John and Jesus, peace be upon them both, they were cousins. And so subhanAllah, even in Jannah, they're together. In their heaven, they're together. And the Prophet ﷺ, he describes Isa alayhi salam. How does he describe him? He looks like he just washed his hair, like as though his hair is drizzling wet. Wavy hair, as though it's just been wet, And then he goes to the third heaven. And he meets whom? Yusuf alayhi salam. And the Prophet ﷺ comments, as a side comment, that Yusuf had half of all beauty. So even the Prophet ﷺ appreciates and admires the beauty that was placed inside this one human being. Half of all beauty was put inside Yusuf alayhi salam. That's how beautiful he was. And then in the fourth heaven, he meets Idris alayhi salam. Then in the fifth heaven he goes, he meets Harun alayhi salam. Harun is whom? The brother of Musa alayhi salam, right? So it's not always the case that 2 prophets who were together are going to be together, right? So Musa is not there with him. And then in the 6th heaven, he meets Musa alayhi salam. When he meets Musa alayhi salam, by the way, whenever they meet each other, they're always welcomed. Welcome to a generous, noble brother. That's how they meet him. When he meets Musa alayhi salam, he has some exchange. And as he's leaving, Musa alayhi salam starts to cry. So it is asked from Musa, why are you crying? Like, you're in the heavens. Why are you crying? He says, because that young boy who came after me, that young lad, you could say, who came after me, he came after, but more of his followers will enter Jannah than mine, than from my nation. What does that tell you? What does that tell you about a prophet? Their concern is so much that even in the heavens, they're still crying for you. Think about that. Like, as much as we, look at the followers of Musa alayhi salam, now, and many of them have gone astray, and there's this idea of like, oh, your message now is not current anymore. Musa alayhi salam is up there. He was sent for them. His heart will always be attached to them. Just like how your heart is attached to, for example, every parent loves their own children. Why don't they love somebody else's children just as much? It's just that Allah made it like that. You love your own kids more than anybody else, right? And this is the same way. No matter how your ummah behaved, as a prophet, you will have a lot of love for your ummah. That is one of the most beautiful things. You know how they say, you have a face only a mother could love? Have you heard this expression? Why do they say this? Because some people, they look so bad that even a mother, but that mother has so much love that no matter how ugly a person is, quote unquote, because no one's really ugly, that she will still love that person. And prophets are the same way. No matter how bad his ummah goes off, he will still always. So if that's what Musa alayhi salam is saying, then imagine how much Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam loves his ummah. And Musa alayhi salam is not crying because he's jealous, but he's saying, look, how many people, he's showing it's not envious, it's not jealous, it's wishing that the blessing that we have as followers of the last Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there was a feeling like, if only my followers could have had this too. So that is an immense hope for us, right? And the next place, now, it's interesting because this one meeting that the Prophet ﷺ has with Musa, it is going to be crucial for something that happens later on, as many of you know. And we'll tell you that this shows that sometimes the people that you meet along your journey and you part from them, it's not the last time you're going to meet them. Sometimes the contacts, they call it networking in our time, Sometimes it happens, you're about to graduate and you go to a networking event where there's, alumni come back. And what do they say? Get the contacts, get in touch, add him on LinkedIn or whatever. Later on, you might need it. This contact for the Prophet ﷺ becomes very, very important. And then the Prophet ﷺ goes to the seventh heaven and he meets whom? Abul Anbiya, the father of the prophets. Even though he did not come first, he's the father of the biblical line of prophets. Okay? Ibrahim alayhi salam. Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he goes there, he's leaning against the Bayt al-Ma'mur. The Bayt al-Ma'mur is the Kaaba of the sky. The Kaaba of the ground is the center of the world. Excuse me. But the center of the universe is a type of a Kaaba that is called the Bayt al-Ma'mur, the established house. And it is in some way geographically aligned with the Kaaba. We don't know how that's supposed to work in the heavens. But it is so packed with angels making tawaf that 70,000 angels enter the tawaf daily. And it's so big that they only get one chance to go around it once in the entire existence of the universe. So if the universe is billions and billions of years old, it'll take them the entire time just to go around it once. So they will only get one chance to go around it. And the Prophet ﷺ meets Ibrahim alayhi salam, and finally he goes to the next stage. Now this is where he leaves the seven heavens and he goes to what they call Sidratul Muntaha. It is the final, they call it the furthest lote tree. Muntaha means what? Yeah, it means the limit. The nihaya, the muntaha. It's the limit or the end. And so this is the boundary of created existence, beyond which no creature can pass. So this is where they say even Jibreel alayhi salam, he's not able to go. And yet our beloved Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he goes. And imagine going to the end of the world through space and finding a tree, which is from this dunya, from this world. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? Like you left behind the world and you went through space and there's planets and there's everything. Now you went to first heaven, second heaven, third heaven, seventh, and when you get to the end of it, it's just one tree. But that one tree is brilliant beyond description, the size of which we cannot imagine. Its leaves are like elephant ears, its fruits are like huge storage jars, and it's covered with divine light. And this is where Jibreel alayhi salam, he says, I can't go any further. So the Prophet ﷺ is shown the limit of creation. And then the Prophet ﷺ, it is said that he goes to a place where he can hear the scratching of the divine pen, scratching the destinies of the universe. And he then goes to a place alone. Where did he go? Where does he go? Where does he go after that? The limit. To meet Allah, where is that? The Arsh? Is that where Allah is? Yeah, that's good. No, yeah, that's good. Even the Arsh is not the location of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Arsh is where Allah controls the entire universe. But the ulama of Aqidah, they mention that because it's called throne, you do not assume in your mind that there's a physical relationship between Allah and His throne. Allah is not sitting on His throne physically like a Superman in the sky, like how the Bible tries to make it seem. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is exalted beyond time and space. What that means is, I asked my shaykh, who I consider to be probably the most knowledgeable on these issues, I said, where did the Prophet go? He said, we don't know. What happened, we don't know. What exact dialogue took place? The answer is, we don't know. Now, we know that he came, we can't even say face to face, because even this is like a physical sign. But what happened, we don't know. It was between servant and Lord. Just like two lovers, nobody knows what the dialogue is between them. Husband and wife, bride and groom, first night of their marriage. Does anybody know the conversation that took place between them? You don't know it. You never know it. That is a secret lost to all of humanity, and it just dies with those two people. And the Prophet ﷺ's meeting with Allah, however that took place, whatever words took place, what we do know is the Prophet ﷺ, he praised Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He praises Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now some people have a mistaken, it's not a correct opinion, that they say that the words of the tashahhud, at-tahiyatu lillahi wa salawatu wa tayyibat, assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabi wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. They say that this was revealed at that time. However, I have not seen the ulama authentically ascribe this to that time. They say that the tahiyat is a conversation, and that's where it was taken, but I've never seen this authentically described. If anybody knows it, they can share it, inshallah. And yet the Prophet ﷺ, he speaks to Allah or directly to Allah, and there was a debate between did the Prophet ﷺ see Allah on that day? And there were some Sahaba who said, no, he did not see his Lord. Nobody can see his Lord, his light. He's just too much nur. And there were some Sahaba who said, yes, he saw Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He saw Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now what the ulama say is that Allahu alam, we don't know, Allah knows best. But when someone says something, affirms something, and another person denies it, two people who are trustworthy, which one would you most likely take? I'll give you an example. Let's say somebody said, the question came, was Dr. Siddiqui here tonight? And let's say you say, I saw Dr. Siddiqui here tonight. And then you say, I didn't see Dr. Siddiqui here tonight. Or you say, he wasn't here tonight. because you didn't see or didn't hear that he was here, and therefore you said he wasn't, is that the only possibility that would have taken place? Maybe he came and you didn't see him. But if someone says, no, I saw him here, what do we assume? That at least one report is establishing it. So even if you say there's difference of opinion between the Sahaba, it's not wrong to say that the Prophet ﷺ, on that opinion, saw Allah himself. But we don't know exactly, right? Now, the Prophet ﷺ was given gifts. He was given the final verses of Surah Baqarah, and he was given 50 daily prayers. And when he comes back down with 50 prayers, salah, he was given the gift of 50 daily prayers to give to his ummah. What we know that he met Musa alayhi salam. He goes down 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. And in the 6th heaven, he meets Musa alayhi salam. And Musa alayhi salam says, what did your Lord give you? Because Musa alayhi salam once encountered Allah in the burning bush. And he was given 10 commandments. He was given the tablets, right? We know this. He said, what did your Lord give you? He said 50 prayers. Musa alayhi salam says, I have experience with Bani Israel, and they can't, like I have experience with an ummah, your people can't handle that. Go back and ask Allah to reduce it. So the Prophet ﷺ, imagine how shy you must be to go and reduce it when you've been given a command. So the Prophet says, but listens to the older Prophet, and he says, okay, I'll go. So the Prophet ﷺ goes and asks Allah again that this is going to be too much, and Allah reduces it to 40. Then Musa ﷺ goes back down. Musa ﷺ still says, that's too much. Your qawm cannot. Can you imagine if we had to do 40 prayers a day? 40. Let's say 50 prayers. You know what that means? Between Fajr and Dhuhr, you have to pray 10 prayers. Between Dhuhr and Asr, pray 10 prayers. Between Asr and Maghrib, 10 prayers. Maghrib and Isha, such a short time. 10 prayers. Not 10 rakats, like 10 different prayers. So this would be very, very a lot. So the Prophet keeps going back and forth, and until it goes from 50 to 40 to 30 to 20 to 10, finally to 5. Musa alayhi salam says, your people cannot handle it. 5 prayers is too much. Musa alayhi salam is saying, I have experience with human beings. I've seen when you call people, the people of Musa alayhi salam, they were saved from Firaun. They saw the seas parting. They saw miracles so amazing that, you would probably never stop praying if you saw this. Even he was, no. Even Musa alayhi salam they were in the midst of Musa alayhi salam. He said, they can't handle 5. The Prophet said, I am too shy now to go in front of my Lord and ask for less. So the Prophet made a decision not to ask for less on our behalf. Trusting us, entrusting us that yes, this ummah can take 5. If you think, the Prophet ﷺ thought we couldn't handle 5 prayers, he would be the first one to go and say, my ummah can't handle this. But he did not. Not just because of embarrassment or shyness. It's because praying to Allah is not a burden. See, this is how we see it sometimes. What do we say? Let's quickly pray and get it out of the way. Right? You have some project, you have some work. Okay, quickly pray and we got to go. We don't delay what we're going to do for prayer. We don't rush other things for prayer. We rush prayer for other things. Right? So our mentality is backward. The Prophet is teaching us. Prayer is a gift. And then Allah announces in the skies that 5 will count as 50. So if you are praying your 5 daily prayers and you're trying your best, it's like you're praying 50 prayers a day. You're always in a communion with Allah. And then we know the Prophet ﷺ comes down, and this is exactly how having a contact is so important. See, Musa alayhi salam, his advice became so, came in clutch. It came in very, very handy. And he benefited. The Prophet ﷺ benefited from consulting. Even though he's Rasulullah, he still took advice. It tells you that a good leader can still take advice. And you should consult people who came before you, people who have history. Sometimes, unfortunately, especially in masjids as well, we don't consult the older folks who have been involved for a long time. Do you notice that? Now, all the events are run by young people in a very kind of social media style. It's a cool, hip style. All the conferences, it's good because it appeals to young people. Do you notice that we don't we don't call senior scholars anymore. It used to be that people would call to speak the older scholars. Now people want the younger scholars. Why? Because we're not paying attention anymore to what the wisdom of the elders. But I'll tell you something. I've noticed so much benefit in going to Dr. Siddiqui, and in just a few words, he will share his wisdom. And sometimes it will clarify the things that I'm asking about. So I encourage all of you as well. Don't think that your parents or your grandparents or your seniors, they don't have knowledge of what you're going through. It may not be the exact same thing, but the wisdom that they have, because they've lived so long and seen things, you can benefit from it. At least listen, at least ask for advice, right? So then the Prophet ﷺ, he is taken down, and on his way down, he sees a number of different amazing sights. And we're not going to get into all of them today. But he sees people being punished for different reasons. People who neglected their prayer, people who were committing adultery, people who would preach but they would not follow. May Allah protect us and save us and forgive us. And then the people who were consuming riba. He saw people being punished in hellfire who committed adultery, who were slanderers and backbiters, who entrusted responsibilities but they failed. Why is the Prophet being shown all these things? And he saw them in horrible ways. He saw people swimming in blood and was told these are the people who consume riba, interest. He saw people's heads being smashed and they said these are people who neglect their prayers. He saw people eating rotten meat even when fresh meat was there. They said this is the people who committed adultery when they had halal spouses to have intimacy with. Why do you think he's being shown this? To scare him? Why do you think he's being shown these horrible punishments, these scary punishments? Why? Well, when people hear about these punishments, and the Prophet ﷺ, he's never seen it himself, they could have said to the Prophet, you're talking about hell? You said we're going to go to hell for oppressing people? Have you even seen this? You're believing in something you have not seen before. You understand? So at least we know one person, who is the one we follow, has seen it. It's not just like you heard it. Yes, we would still believe it. If Allah said it, we would still believe it. But it gives us a type of a confidence that this is real. And if any of us are doing these things, immediately we stop. Oh man, somebody's committing adultery. Someone's dealing in interest. Immediately it tells you, whoa, it brings it to life. That people are being punished. Their lips are being cut by scissors. People who preach, but they don't follow what they say. They command to good, but they don't practice it themselves. Immediately, it's scary. Because anybody who is giving a lecture, giving a khutbah, or even just telling other people, hey, you should be doing this is haram, halal. Like they get scared if they hear this. Because our Rasul verified it. And then the Prophet also saw pleasant things as well. He saw flowing rivers of paradise. He saw palaces of gold and silver. He smelled a fragrance beyond description. And so he saw many things. Finally, when he gets back, it's the same night. It is said that his bed is still warm, and Allah knows best, So he comes back, and he is told to come back. Now, he has 5 daily prayers, but does he wake everybody up to pray salah at that time? When does the first prayer take place with the Muslims? Does anybody know? When does the first prayer take place? Actually, the Dhuhr prayer. So Fajr, the Ummah does not pray Fajr that day. Okay? Why? Why doesn't the Ummah pray Fajr? Think about it. How hard would it be for him to come back from an overnight journey and wake everybody up for the first time at Fajr? Imagine you started getting a knock on the door at 5 a.m. in the morning. Hey, wake up, it's time to pray. People were secret Muslims back then. They were secretly Muslim. Some people were Muslim with non-Muslim family. So that was not the time that you could meet everybody. But Dhuhr time, by the time it's midday, the word could spread that there is salah. And so they met in the house of Darul Arqam. And when they met over there, this is where the Prophet ﷺ was shown how to pray by Jibreel alayhi salam. Jibreel alayhi salam would come down between the prayer times to show him the prayer times. And it is said that the Prophet ﷺ, Jibreel would be making an action, and the Prophet ﷺ would make the action as well, and the people would follow. But they couldn't see Jibreel, only the Prophet ﷺ saw Jibreel. And this is how, and it is all, the ulama also say that the first prayer was Dhuhr, and we'll wrap up with this or in a short second, that the first prayer was Dhuhr to symbolize that Islam had come shining like the sun, taking over every belief that came before it, and superseding every religion, and negating or canceling out any previous laws or scriptures. And so it also shows us that prayer is actually an open thing. We in these societies, when there's non-Muslims around, we act like prayer is supposed to be secret, a private thing. Do that in your house. This is a secularized mentality. No, for us, we don't pray in the middle of the street. You know, some Muslims, they annoy non-Muslims. They annoy Muslims too. If you're on a plane, you have no right to pray in the middle of the aisle. Oh, but it's my namaz. I'm going to miss it. I don't care. This is my prayer. No, my friend. You are disturbing other people. You have to go to a place where you're not blocking. Or if you're blocking an exit aisle, you pray in your seat. So Islam doesn't tell us to disturb other people. It's not saying to go into the middle of Irvine Spectrum and do a big congregational prayer and cut everybody off. No. But you can go and pray in public. It's okay. As long as you're safe, There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, by praying publicly, all those airport lounge, the airport prayer rooms, you know why do you think they just made that out of the kindness of their heart to remind Muslims they have to pray? No. Muslims said, we're not going to stop our prayers. So we're going to pray in the corner. We're not going to disturb anybody, but we will be praying in the corner. We will be praying under the stairs. And so finally they said, we can't have people praying everywhere. Please, we make a room for you, but we can't call it a mosque or musalla. We have to call it a multi-faith room or a meditation room or a reflection space. And don't worry, we'll put other signs up, but we know you're the only one to use it. So public prayer, never be shy to pray. I know sometimes there's a pressure, but try to bring confidence. Don't miss the prayer, as long as you're safe. Now, the Quraysh the next morning heard about the trip to Jerusalem, and the part about going to the heavens, that was not what they objected to. Because they didn't even believe in that. They said, how could you get to Jerusalem overnight? So, subhanAllah, they surrounded the Prophet ﷺ, and they saw the Prophet ﷺ looking down. And he was down because he was worried that people would not believe him, and they would commit kufr, disbelief. So somebody asked him, I believe it was Abu Sufyan or Abu Jahl, why are you feeling down? He said, because I went to Jerusalem last night. They said, in one night? You did a journey that takes us 30 nights to go? You did it in one night there and back? He said, yes. He said, if I bring other people here, will you also say the same thing, or are you going to change your stories? No, I will say the same thing. So they gathered all the people of Quraysh. Listen. Tell us, where did you go? Jerusalem. In one night? Yes. The Prophet, they said, how do we know that? The Prophet said, okay, if you've been to Jerusalem, tell us, how many gates does the Masjid al-Aqsa have? And the Prophet, he went there in the nighttime, so he did not count those things. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought the vision to his eyes as though he's seeing it in the day. And he was able to describe Jerusalem. Now the Arabs were traders, so they would travel. And their hearts, the enemies of Islam, their hearts sank. Because like, we know he's never been to Jerusalem, but he's describing it perfectly. And then the Prophet told them, on the way back, I saw this caravan, and they're going to arrive. They're on the way. Your caravan is coming back before the time of calls, and you didn't know when people were going to come back. They will arrive exactly this time. And there was another group of people who something broke, and their camel broke loose, and they have this problem. They're going to arrive back this time. And lo and behold, exactly when he said, those people arrived back. How did he know where they were in the journey? And so they were dumbfounded. But there were still some people at that time whose faith became shaky. But there was one man, we know, they came to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu before he heard about the Isra and the Mi'raj, and they said, have you heard that your companion says he went to Jerusalem overnight and back? And Abu Bakr said, Did he really say that? He said, yes. And they said, if he said it, then I believe it. And this is why he became known as As-Siddiq. He is the great verifier of truth because he didn't need proof. He didn't even need to make sure. He just wants to know, did the Prophet say it? It's true. Our iman should be like this. Not that, okay, the Prophet told us to do certain action like brush your teeth, and you need science to tell you this is actually good for you. And they say, okay, now I'll do it. Like, why should I, do this certain action? Why should I sleep on my right side? Why should I sit down when drinking water? It doesn't mean you have to do it every time, but why is it sunnah? We often wait for non-Muslims to discover the benefits of prostration, the benefits of XYZ, and then we respect it. Because our minds have become colonized. But somebody who loves Allah and His Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, once there's a hadith or Quran, you accept it and you don't question. You may ask for the explanation, but you don't put them against doubts. So inshallah khair, alhamdulillah, we have taken our time to recite the Isra and the Mi'raj. This is a blessed gathering. I believe that it is through these gatherings, even though we're small in number, it's okay, but this is carrying on a tradition that I ask you all to take this to your children, take this to your generations, take this to your families, because this is the fire that you have to keep lighting in every single generation. We have to make sure this story does not become, because when you do that, you lose your connection to the Holy Land. You lose your connection to Masjid al-Aqsa. You lose the idea that Islam is not just a local, regional religion. It is a universal religion. That we feel confident to come and to say to anybody, Islam is for you as well as for me. We're respectful of other people, but we believe we're not ashamed or shy. We believe very strongly that there are 7 heavens. We believe very strongly that the prophets were sent with the same message. We believe very strongly that there's punishment for the actions that you do. And we believe very strongly that prayer is one of the most important things you can do. This is why they say all of the commands of Islam came from the heavens to the earth. But for this one command, the Prophet was invited to up beyond the 7 heavens to where only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. That is the gift. That is the value. Imagine you go to a king and he gives you a present. What would it be like? And finally, I'll end with this and then we can open for some questions. One of the, I believe it's Allama Iqbal, he mentions, rahmatullahi alayhi, the difference between a saint and a prophet is that a saint does good things on earth, but when once he reaches heaven, he's concerned for himself and he just wants to stay there. That's it. The world is too hard. The saint wants to be with God. But the prophet was the one who went into those heavens and went to meet God. The most blissful experience you could probably imagine. And then he still chose to come back for our sake. Imagine the misery of this world and the misery he was put through. And he goes to a place where all that's over. What would you say? Khalas, I don't want to go back to the dunya. I'm done. Right? Like if you get a beautiful house, you don't want to go back to a lesser house that you once had. You want to go up. And yet for love of us, he came back and still suffered. And after the Isra and the Mi'raj was when the Hijrah occurred. After the Hijrah is when Islam spread. And that's how it came to us today. So sometimes you go through that spiritual experience and you have to use it as your fuel. Sometimes we go through an experience maybe in our lifetime. Use it as your fuel to work for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So sallallahu alaihi Muhammad wa alihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah, you guys have been a very patient audience. Questions, comments, thoughts? What's on your mind? Any questions? Mm-hmm. In the sense that things don't honor him. Do you understand what I'm saying? Things do not increase his value. Allah is constantly increasing his honor. But it's not like he went there, so now the Prophet is somehow has an accolade. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. I'll give you an example. Let's say there's somebody who's not very significant in society. they go on TV. That appearance on television boosts their profile. Then they get invited to, the Capitol building or the White House or something, or, some place that's very famous. They get invited to the state legislature. Then you immediately say, wow, this person's rubbing shoulders with big people. So their status and their rank, and then they go to Buckingham Palace. They meet the king over there. So all of these things in dunya increases a person's status and rank. They were invited to the Oscars. They were invited to the Grammys. They're on stage. They're winning an award. Those things, so things are honoring the person. And that's not the case with the Prophet ﷺ. He's not honored by a lesser thing is not increasing him. Allah is the one who increases the Prophet ﷺ all the time, constantly. You understand what I'm saying? So in other words, he is the best of creation. Masjid al-Aqsa is blessed by him stepping foot on Masjid al-Aqsa as well. Do you get what I'm saying? The Prophet ﷺ, look, think about this. If you don't agree with me, what was Medina before the Prophet came there? Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. It wasn't a place of any significance. He passes away and is buried there, and now that area, that entire area, is a Mubarak place. You get what I'm saying? So this is one thing to just realize. It's not, the journey did not boost him. It's part of his journey. It's one of his stops along the way. It's important to understand that. Yeah, of course, yeah. So this is a correction. Prophets are declared, but they're always prophets. They don't become prophets. So this is something because prophethood is something the person is chosen for. But their mission or their message or their revelation comes at a certain time. So the Prophet, they asked, "O Rasulullah, when were you a prophet? When were you a prophet?" So the stereotypical answer may be when he got revelation. He said, "No, I was a prophet when Adam was still being mixed in his clay. I was a prophet." Do you see the difference? So the prophets are not like holy men, like a Buddha who's meditating and then they got enlightenment. It doesn't work like that. It's just the revelation came, the mission started at a certain time. But in the knowledge of Allah, there were always prophets. No, your interaction with Allah as a divine, what I'm trying to say is things. Your interaction with the divine is obviously a spiritual, I don't know, I can't judge a prophet's spiritual status. What I'm trying to say is, like the fact that he went from one place to another overnight, the fact that he got Buraq, he's honoring those things. Do you understand what I'm saying? He is blessing the world. And we just have to make sure we see it in that way. Not the way that, he's not like a novel, a character in a novel like Harry Potter, starts off like this and then he gets better and better and better and better and better because of the things. You get what I'm saying? Because these tasks are bigger than him. I mean, he is the best of creation, right? So, yeah, it's a spiritual question. It's not necessarily like a Sharia question, yeah. Yeah. I've read estimates like it probably wouldn't be more than 200 people. I mean, like 70 to 80 went to Abyssinia for the first hijrah, and probably a certain number stayed back. I don't think it would be more than 150, even 100, 150, 200. There are probably more estimates about it, but because a number of people had gone to Abyssinia and the number stayed back. But it's not more than, it's a very small number. For all intents and purposes, the Quraysh would have considered it a small cult. a small movement. That's why they tried to crush it. They didn't realize it's the deen of Allah, right? Yeah, everyone was 100%. Yeah, he didn't have to like start saying, "Come on, guys, come on, pray. Come on, you're missing your prayer. Come on, prayer." No, you know why? Because he had spent 10 years plus preparing their iman already, so they were with him 100%. If he just said a word of revelation, they memorized it. If he said jump, they would jump. If he said, I mean, he didn't say this in that time, but if he said jump into battle, they would jump into battle. Yeah, so then it is said that, it did test the faith of some people, but we don't know, I don't know exactly who is involved in that, but it was regarded as a test, but when your iman is prepared, this is why it's so important. Don't judge Islam by making Islam prove itself to you every single step. You have complete faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then everything you learn will go in its proper place. These days, we have like a shaky faith sometimes, where someone learns about something and then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh no, I have doubts," because you're not working on making your iman strong. You're worried about getting information. That's why I think the first thing for a convert, for example, should not be learn. I don't believe that. I believe it should be deepen your faith, practice a little bit, get meanings. And then when you learn, it'll fall into fertile ground. But because of the internet, people learn things before their iman is ripe. So it doesn't go in the same way. And then they have so many doubts. Why is it like this? Why is it like that? You know what I'm saying? Whereas like this is the difference. Like you ask a young person from here, even, sometimes, something about a question of like war. Why was this war fought? And they come with doubts. Because they've heard information, but their iman is not. Whereas when you go back home to an Eastern country, a Muslim land, and you bring up a controversial question, like, okay, so what? Don't you know the Muslims fought a war? So what? What about the multiple wives? So what? Because I don't know the answer, but I'm not letting it touch my iman like that. I might try to find out why, but that's not touching my faith. So that's why it's important to prepare your iman. Mm-hmm. Very, very, very important question. And one of the ways to do that, first of all, is to get regular in your practice. When you show up in front of Allah multiple times a day, it's increasing your iman. You learn about the stories of the prophets. See, we get into the technicalities, Sharia debates, halal, haram, polemics. We get into that and we don't even know the stories of the prophets. That these stories these events are made for iman increasing. And we spend time living our Islam, and then things happen where you feel Allah's help and it increases your iman. You make dua, your dua is answered, increases your iman. Then you go and somebody touches you and you cry and you meet Muslims and you say salam, you feel soft, your iman keeps climbing. So the point, then when you get knowledge about something, you can handle it. But right now we do information first because we're living in an information age. For me to become a strong Muslim, I need to know everything. No, you don't need to know everything. You'll learn. But if you're not even ready to accept the words of Allah, it's not a right way to do it. That everything that the non-Muslim doesn't agree with, you have to assume the non-Muslim might be right and then ask your scholar, why is it like this? You know what I mean? No. Look like back home. Or back home for people in the Muslim lands. If you insulted the Prophet on the street, anybody would slap you. And here, if sometimes with young people, if someone insults the Prophet or gives a controversial thing, instead of standing up for him, they run home scared and they write and they say, "I'm in doubts now." So do you see the difference? In one, the love is so strong. It's like your parents. If someone said something bad about your mother, if someone came to you and said that your mother did this bad thing in high school, I knew her, Are you going to say, oh my God, I don't know, maybe my mom really did it? You'll say, you'll try to give them one slap in the face. I'm sorry to say it like that, but you'll get so upset. So upset. Why? Because you love your mother, you trust your mother, you would never want anybody talking bad about her, you believe in her. You have yaqeen that she did something for you. But for the Prophet ﷺ, someone comes and says, why did the captives of this battle, why were they sentenced to punishment? And then they get scared. Because love for Rasulullah ﷺ has not been increased. Even nasheeds, inshad, poetry, increases love for him. You know, that's the question. Alhamdulillah. Any other questions before we close? Yes, sister? Do you know if people have? They visit every day, but it's under occupation. Yeah, they visit every day, all the time. Yeah, all the time. So the tourism, the religious tourism is still active, but you know, it's not made easy, but it is, people are going. Yeah, alhamdulillah, inshallah, one day we all go, inshallah, yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, what it means is that, you know, you can be a first among equals. So in the office, they're all the same. So the prophethood of one is not necessarily better than the prophethood of the other, which is why the Prophet ﷺ said, do not say I am better than Yunus ibn Matta. Do not say I'm better than Prophet Jonah. Do not say I am better than, he said to people, don't say I'm better than that. But at the same time, he said, I am the leader of all of humanity. And I'm not saying this to boast. He said that too. So the two can exist where Allah is trying to say, don't get into the debate, because everybody, what they'll do is they say, my prophet is better than your prophet. You know, when we were young, and you know, we were living growing up in an age of racism, people would say to me, my God can beat up your God. You know, if you meet people, you know, this is the kind of petty thinking. No. The prophets were all one. They were all brothers. This is what was trying to be established. So otherwise, the Christians would say Jesus is better than Muhammad, and then the Jews would say Musa is better than Jesus, and then the Muslims would say, well, Prophet Muhammad is better than all of them. This is not the debate we're trying to get into. But does this mean that he's not honored above all of creation? Yes, you can honor equals in different ways. Still equal. And the best of creation. Of all creation. Why? Because he represents, what the scholars say is that he represents the highest form of worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nobody worshipped Allah better than him. Nobody, if the fact that all of the Day of Judgment is designed for human beings to be tested, and he is their leader on that day, it goes hand in hand to say this. But if you asked him, you know, when people said to him, oh, best of creation, he said, that's Abraham. He would say that, the scholars say, out of humility, that he never tried to say that. But what we say is that he's the best of creation by what Allah has blessed him with. So for example, a father could have 5 children, a mother could have 5 children, and she said, look, my kids are all equal to me. But does that mean that every child act like what they go through in life is going to be the same? What they do for their parents is going to be the same? No. But you say, but my kids are all equal. You should treat them equally. You get what I'm saying? So Allah knows best. Yeah. Okay. Jazakallah khair. If there aren't any other questions, then thank you very much. Oh, one last question. That's a very good. I didn't answer this question. This is the biggest thing. Okay. Is it a physical journey or is it a spiritual or mental journey? Here's the question. If it was a mental or dream journey, why would it be a miracle? If I told you I had my dreams, I went to Jerusalem and came back, would you say, no, I don't believe you? If I said I talked to Allah in my dream, would you say, no, I don't believe you? You'd say, okay, that's your dream, right? Like you could do anything in your dream. The fact that it was something that people could reject or deny meant that it was physical, the entire thing. All right? Jazakallah khairan. Wa sallallahu alayhi wa Muhammad wa alihi wa sallam. There is pizza, inshallah, for everybody, the families. May Allah bless you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.